She was 10 years old when they came. No warning, no diplomacy, no threat. Just fire from the sky and just screams. Then silence. She didn't know where they had all gone, her parents, her friends, her teachers. But she had to keep moving. There was nothing left here for her. So she walked on, following the path that led out of the city into the countryside, over hills. Even in the face of great sadness, joy can still be found. And even when all seems lost, life can still go on. And valleys, through fields of wheat and barley, along rivers and streams, over mountains and through forests. Until she came to a clearing. The world was different now. The sun, it didn't shine as bright. The birds, they didn't sing as sweet. She felt a strange sense of calm wash over her, a feeling she had never experienced before. It was as if the tree was calling to her, beckoning her to come closer. And as she approached, she felt her anger and sadness begin to fade away, replaced by a sense of wonder and peace. The colors of the flowers, they were all turned to gray. Everyone she knew, everyone she loved, they were all gone. And the only thing that remained was an endless gray sky and the sound of the wind whispering through the trees. She walked through the silent streets, past the houses with their windows blown out. Their walls torn down, their roofs caved in. In the middle of the clearing stood a single tree. Its branches reached up to the sky like arms, and its leaves rustled softly in the breeze. She sat down at the base of the tree and closed her eyes, listening to the wind in the leaves. And as she did, she remembered all the good times she had spent outside, playing with her friends, running through the fields, climbing trees, swimming in the river. She remembered the laughter, the joy, the freedom she had felt. And she realized that even though the world had changed, some things would never change. The sun would still rise and set. The birds would still sing. The flowers would still bloom. And as long as she held on to the memories of the world before, she would have the strength to keep going, to keep moving forward. Because even in the darkest of times, hope can still bloom. She walked into a crater that used to be her home. The wind snatched the flowers from her hands, and the thorns tore at her skin. As she made her way through the rubble, or rather, she saw the space where he would sit, the indentation in the dust where his body used to rest. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She only had eyes for that spot, for the ghost that sat there. She stood there staring at the blackened bones for what felt like an eternity, though in reality it was only a few minutes. A few agonizing minutes that stretched into an eternity. It was as if he were still there, just invisible. To everyone but her, he was real. To everyone but her, he was gone. She could feel the heat of the flames licking at her heels, but she didn't dare look back. Not until she reached the charred remains of what had once been her sanctuary, her haven, her place of solace. And there in the midst of the blackened bones, she saw him sitting. She wanted to scream, to shatter the silence that had been screaming in her ears since the day they buried him. Then slowly, so slowly, she sank to the ground, to the dust that was once her home. She buried her face in her hands, letting the fine particles trickle through her fingers, through her tears. No, she didn't cry because she was too numb to cry. Her tears had dried up long ago. All that was left was a gaping hole in her chest, a wound that had turned to dust, a love that had turned to ashes. And she stayed there for hours, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe a lifetime. He might be gone, but a part of him, a big part of him, lived on in her. And that knowledge, that realization, was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because she would never truly be alone, and a curse because she would never truly be free. Time had no meaning in that place, in that moment. All that mattered was the dust, the charred bones, and the ghost that sat there, patiently waiting, it seemed, for her to join him. And when she finally moved, when she finally lifted her head up to leave, she didn't cry. As she walked away from the crater, she knew one thing: she would never, ever forget him. They said Earth surrendered. That resistance was hopeless. She didn't care about Earth anymore. All she cared about was saving her own skin. They were right. She had let them down. It was a tear for a world that was lost, a world that could have been, a world that they had destroyed. It was a tear for the Earth, a tear for humanity, a tear for herself. The humans had let each other down. There was no point in trying to fix something that was broken beyond repair. All she had ever done was try to make a difference. She remembered a time when she had hope. Hope for a better world. Hope for a brighter future. Hope for humanity. But now, all she had was despair. Despair for a dying planet. Despair for a doomed species. Despair for herself. And for what? For this? Was this the future she had been fighting for all those years? What had they done to deserve this? What had they done to deserve her wrath? They had not listened to her warnings. They had not heeded her pleas. They had not changed their ways. Instead, they had continued to destroy her, to poison her, to kill her. And now it was too late. It was too late to save the Earth. It was too late to save humanity. A future where the very air they breathed was poisonous, where the seas were nothing. There was no point in trying to save any of them. They had all made their choices. They had all reaped what they had sown. There was no hope for them, no hope for the Earth. There was only despair. But a toxic wasteland, where the only remnants of humanity's former glory were buried under mountains of trash, where the sky was always gray, where it never rained, where the sun never shone, where the wind carried the scent of death, rather than the sweet smell of blooming flowers. She remembered a time when the world wasn't like this, when the air was clean, when the water sparkled, when the earth was green and the sky a brilliant blue. She looked at the same sky she had looked up to for so many years, the same sky that had witnessed the birth of her people and the death of her world. All she could do now was watch as the world ended, as the humans died, as life as they knew it ceased to exist. And yet, even in the face of such overwhelming despair, a single tear escaped her eye. This woman is a legend. By 18, she was fluent in 6 alien dialects. By 23, she had built the weapon that would save the world. But who is she? And where did she learn these unique skills? Her father was an engineer and her mother was a linguist. So, from a very young age, she was interested in 2 things: languages and aliens. Her name is Dr. Zara Halson, and she is from a small village on the outskirts of New Alexandria. And by the time she was 8, she was so fluent in their language that she was able to negotiate peace between them and the humans. When she was just 6 years old, she picked up a radio and started making contact with these weird-ass creatures. So she went to an isolated research facility to build a weapon that could stop it. I wish we knew more about her. So where did she get the funding for this? Well, she made a deal with the government. They gave her $80 million to make the weapon, and in return, she got 10% of the profits from the patents that they filed from the research. With the help of some friends, she created an ultrasonic device that emitted a frequency that destroyed the Devourer's ships. Throughout her teenage years, she continued to make first contact with many different alien species, and by the time she was 18, she was fluent in 6 different alien dialects. She then went on to study linguistics at university, and upon graduating, she became the youngest member of the Galactic Ambassador Program, all while being fluent in like 24 alien languages. During her travels, she met an alien known as the Devourer of Worlds, who told her that in 6 days, it would consume the Earth. And until then, here's another story about a secret weapon that you might like. But this took 8 years and a lot of money. So this woman literally saved the world and also made a ton of money doing it. But sadly, that's the end of the story. If you like optimistic science and tech stories, stay tuned for more. They never suspected she'd built something impossible: a neural pulse overload transmitter that would fry their brains. But how could she have built it? It was supposed to be impossible. The ship was filled with advanced technology, but also an incredible danger. Then she began to experiment, using her powers to create weapons. She made bombs that could level entire cities, devices that could control people's minds. But none of it worked very well. See, she wasn't very good at controlling her powers. You see, the crazy thing about this planet is that it has no atmosphere, which means that radio waves can just pass straight through the planet. They can travel unimpeded from one side to the other. And it just so happens that the part of the planet where she built her base is directly in line with the core of the star. So as the star rotates, the frequency it emits hits her base, charging up her device. She was too unstable. But it just goes to show that sometimes the most unlikely sources can provide the most power. Just ask the crew of the Starship Enterprise or anyone else who's ever encountered a Q continuum. They know that even the smallest, most insignificant-looking beings or objects can be incredibly dangerous. Because in the universe, there are no limits. There are no boundaries. There are no rules. Only the laws of physics, which can be bent and broken at will. See, when the ship crashed, it released a large amount of radiation, killing everyone on the surface. But there was one survivor, a little girl who crawled out of the wreckage and hid in the desert. She survived, but she was exposed to massive amounts of radiation. Radiation that changed her DNA, making her the only human on Earth with the ability to harness the power of stars. Years ago, an ancient alien ship had crashed on this very planet. She grew up in the desert, building a home out of the ship's wreckage, studying the technology, learning everything she could. She created a neural pulse overload transmitter that would allow her to enter people's minds, manipulate their thoughts, control their actions. Things like build a transmitter that could cover an entire planet in mind control devices. A transmitter that could allow her to enter the minds of everyone on the planet and manipulate their thoughts. She could make them do anything she wanted. And it was all triggered by a specific frequency. A frequency that was being emitted by the star they were currently orbiting. See, stars emit a range of frequencies, but one frequency in particular is known to cause neural activity in living things. And this frequency? It just so happened to match the exact frequency needed to power her device. But then she discovered a way to stabilize her powers, a way to make them stronger than she'd ever imagined. It was the perfect energy source, a clean, renewable energy source that would allow her to do things she'd never been able to do before. And the best part was, they would never see it coming. She never expected to find a power source this strong, this reliable. She tapped her thumb against her sleeve once. What happened next was recorded by 7 satellites orbiting the Earth. Her name is Sam, and she's just an ordinary girl who lives in an extraordinary world. After all, it makes crime almost impossible. Every single move you make is being recorded, then how could anyone get away with anything? That's the universal symbol for secrecy. And if you do it in a public place where there are no cameras, no microphones, no way for the authorities to track you or listen in on you, then your little meeting will remain top secret. Well, it turns out that there are ways. You see, the year is 2045 and every human on Earth has a digital shadow. A digital shadow is basically a record of everything that a person does, every move they make, every word they say, every purchase they make, every like or comment they post online. Until then, stay tuned. All of it is stored in the cloud and can be accessed by anyone with the right permissions. Locate and track people. They had cameras, microphones, thermal imaging technology, and facial recognition software. But because they were in space, nobody knew they were there. She did it in an isolated part of the forest where she knew there were no cameras or microphones, or so she thought. They watched her take off her backpack, pull out a blanket, and lie down on the ground. They watched her take a deep breath and close her eyes, as if she were meditating. But she wasn't meditating. She was waiting. Now, in theory, this sounds like a great idea. For example, if you wanted to meet someone for a coffee, and you didn't want the government or any other organization to know about it, all you have to do is tap your thumb against your sleeve twice. Except that's not what happened. You see, when Sam tapped her thumb against her sleeve, she didn't do it in a public place. In reality, there were 7 satellites orbiting the Earth, highly advanced pieces of technology that were designed to do only 2 things. And as Sam strolled through the forest, the satellites tracked her every move, recording everything that she did, waiting for someone who would soon arrive. Someone who was also shielded by the digital shadows cast by the satellites. Someone who would change the course of history. What history? Well, that is for me to know, and you'll find out next week when we release the next part of this story. It all started when a user posted this image to Reddit. At first glance, it looks like your typical gas giant with rings and all. Why would he attack such an insignificant planet like Earth? Maybe Sauron's minions, the orcs, have been mining these rings for their precious metals and jewels. All we know is that something strange is happening to the rings of Sagittarius, and it's up to us to figure out what that is. So grab your nerd friends, your elven cloak, and your flamethrower. We're going to need all the help we can get. Maybe they chopped down the giant's cheese rings to make some kind of weird orc throne. Or maybe, just maybe, they lit the giant's farts on fire. I don't know why we're all assuming that these rings are being destroyed. Maybe they're being defended. Maybe the true ending of the Lord of the Rings story is that after Sauron's defeat, the elves and dwarves got together and built a giant statue of him on top of Mount Doom to worship him as a god. Okay, never mind. That's even weirder. Well, in the books, Sauron was obsessed with controlling the minds of men. Maybe he's doing the same thing to the Jovian moons. But what does this have to do with the burning question of the day? Well, everything. You see, when a user asked about the white spot, another user replied, "Looks like someone lit the giant's farts on fire." Now we all know that gas giants have rings, but what we don't know is what they're made of. They could be rock, they could be ice, they could even be pieces of cheese. But what we do know is that these rings are very sensitive. Just a small nudge can make them disappear. But something is off. What's that big white spot? It almost looks like a gigantic eye staring back at us. Some commenters thought it might be a visual bug or glitch in the game, but one user had a more sinister explanation. They said it looks like the Eye of Sauron from Lord of the Rings, and it just so happens that the planet's name is Sagittarius. Coincidence? I think not. Okay, let's just assume for a second that this is actually the Dark Lord Sauron. And if these rings are anything like the Rings of Power from Lord of the Rings, then they could also be super flammable. The point is, we don't know what's going on. If you like optimistic science and tech stories, stay tuned for more. They found one recording. It was from the very beginning of the war, just a few months in. And it was from a village that had been completely destroyed. The Russian army had come through, had killed everyone in the village. They had burned their houses to the ground. But this is what war is. This is what war has always been. He has friends and family. He has people who love him, people who he loves. He has hopes and dreams for the future. He has ambitions. He has fears and worries like all of us. Because then we become no better than the very people that we are fighting against. But he's decided that the best way to deal with his anger, with his loss, with his pain, is to take it out on others, to make sure that other people pay the price for what he has gone through. And that is the mentality of war. It is not just tanks, and it is not just rockets and bombs. If you decide to take up arms against another person, you have to accept that there will be times during that conflict where you will be filled with nothing but hate, and that hate will consume you. And the only way to deal with it, the only way to get through it, is to make sure that you do not give into that hate, that you don't let it consume you, that you find other ways to deal with it, whether that's talking to your friends, talking to your family, or simply accepting that there are some things in life that just can't be fixed. That there are some wounds that will never truly heal. War is also personal. War is also human. It's about people killing other people for what they believe in, for what they are fighting for, and ultimately for what they hate. And then they had moved on. And somewhere along the way, someone had found the recording device that had been used by the Russian soldiers. And on it, they had found the voice of hate. It said, "You killed my village, so I gave you the same." And then the recording ended. I've thought about that recording a lot in the last few weeks, because we've heard a lot about the atrocities that have been committed by the Russian army. By regular soldiers, by commanders, by generals. I think that when we listen to that recording, we should remember that the person who made that recording is no different than any of us. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe in, where you come from, what your background is. But the worst thing that we can do is to give in to that hate, to let it consume us. Some say she still lives, but on earth her name is spoken in silence. As a girl who learned how to burn the stars back, her legend grew. And when the moon rises, it's as if the night itself begins to breathe. Wishes that could change the very fabric of one's destiny. But for Astra, it wasn't about changing her fate. The trees seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The whispering trees now stood silent, and the air was thick with anticipation. In the distance, she heard the rush of water, and as she walked towards the sound, she saw it, a spring nestled between two moss-covered stones. The water shimmered, and as it caught the moonlight, it seemed to dance with an otherworldly light. It grew with every laugh, with every dance, with every dream she helped ignite. Because in the end, it's not the stars that burn, but the hopes and dreams that burn brightly within us. And sometimes, all it takes is a little magic to fan the flames. And as Astra placed her hand on its rough bark, she felt a jolt, a surge of power that coursed through her veins like liquid starlight. Oh no, she already had a fate worse than any. She wanted to change the fate of others, to give them a chance at a life that shimmered with possibilities, a life like the stars that twinkled above her head. It was under such a sky that a young girl named Astra made her way through the forest. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, secrets only the ancient ones knew. And Astra, with her head held high and her eyes shining with curiosity, walked right into the heart of the whispering wood. When the sun sets over the mountains, the sky turns a deep shade of blue. When the moon was full and the stars were out, she would dance in the clearings, her laughter echoing through the silent trees. And those who stumbled upon her dance, they, too, felt the pull of the ancient magic. They, too, felt the echoes of 1,000 whispers urging them to follow their dreams, to reach for the stars. She had heard the stories, tales of a hidden spring deep within the forest, a spring whose waters held the power to grant wishes. She reached the clearing where the old oak stood, its branches gnarled and twisted like the roots of a forgotten magic. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the forest was bathed in an ethereal glow. Astra cupped her hands, the icy water filling them. She brought it to her lips, not to drink, but to understand. The water tasted like stardust and moonlight, and as she swallowed, it was as if the secrets of the universe itself were being unlocked within her. From that day forward, Astra became the guardian of the whispering wood, the girl who could burn the stars back. For Astra's legend didn't end with her wishes.